Hey everyone, this is Robin at One Paper Street. Today I'm going to show you how you can make a card using paint samples. So for today's project, I just grabbed a handful of different paint swatches from the local hardware store, and I decided that I wanted to turn them into little pieces of fruit. So I have some W9 stamps and dies that we're going to use for this project. I'm also going to be using StazOn black ink today. That's going to be really important because the surfaces of my paint swatches are really smooth. So in order for the ink to stay, I have to use StazOn. As you can see, I'm stamping each fruit with the coordinating swatch color. I'm stamping multiple stamps at a time so that the idea is by the time I'm done, I have lots of different pieces of fruit that I can use for my card. I might not need to use them all, but at least I'll have them if I decide I need them. Now I cut out all of my fruit using a die cutting machine off camera, but now that I have everything cut out, I'm going to carefully assemble everything. I'm going to try to place different things together and see what I like and what I don't. I like to space out the different colors and the different shapes so that we have a little bit more on the left side of the card than on the right, and it's kind of tapering off towards the right. And again, I do have a lot of pieces to work with, so I have a lot of creative freedom. I can either use a lot of fruit or I can use a little bit of fruit. In this case, I chose to start off with a little bit of fruit, and then I think I'm going to end up adding more later. And once I find something that I like, I'm going to go ahead and stick washi tape over top of the design. This will allow me to flip the pieces over without losing the pattern that I created. I used Scrapbook adhesive repositionable mounting squares on the back of my fruit so that I'd be able to stick it down to my card base. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I did end up adding even more pieces of fruit onto the card off camera, and I really like the way it turned out. You'll also notice that some of the fruit comes off the background. That's okay, we can just trim it off later. So now I'm going to mount the design onto the card base. I found some really wonderful light yellow cardstock in my craft room and decided that that would be the perfect background for this card. By this point, I was really loving how the card turned out, and I wanted to add an amazing sentiment along with it. I decided to go with a Spellbinders sentiment pack that I have, and I'm placing the sentiment on vellum and heat embossing it with black embossing powder from WOW. The one tip I would give you when you're embossing on vellum is to try to stamp it down correctly the first time. I've also found if you press the stamp down too hard, it makes a double impression, so be mindful of that. Anyways, back to our card. I mentioned that I was using a Spellbinder stamp set. The words I chose specifically were sending you happy thoughts. I love this sentiment and these words put together because I feel like it is good for almost any occasion. So my WOW embossing powder just popped up on screen. I'm using black powder. One thing I will note is I didn't use any kind of baby powder tool or an applicator on my vellum before I stamped it down, and I wish I would have done that because it helps remove any static. It's especially noticeable when you have static because black embossing powder is going to stick out like a sore thumb. Once I'm done applying the embossing powder, I'm going to heat it to melt the powder and make it stick to the vellum. Then I'm trimming it down to size so that it'll fit on my card. The vellum square was so small it just made sense to cut it with scissors instead of trying to use a trimming tool, but if it was a bigger piece of vellum, I'd use a trimming tool. So next I'm going to take the piece of vellum that I had and add it to the front of the card. I also want to use some of the extra pieces of fruit that I have to embellish the sentiment. Now I haven't put any adhesive on the back of the vellum. Because it's clear, I need to be really careful with how I do that. But I will put a little bit of adhesive on the fruit to pick up the piece of vellum and then to be able to flip it over. And then I'll add some Tombow Mono Aqua liquid glue to the back of my vellum, and I'll only place it where the words are so that the glue doesn't stick out. I'm also going to place a clear stamp block over top of the vellum as the glue is drying. This will keep it from peeling up in any weird places. Well, that's it for today's card. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've linked to all the materials that I used in the description below, and if you'd like to check out more tutorials, please visit my YouTube channel or subscribe here. Remember, you can also visit my website at www.onepaperstreet.com or follow me on Instagram or Facebook at OnePaperStreet. Have a great day, guys!